very good afternoon to you, our cherished listeners. It's always indeed super exciting to come your way every Wednesday with your favorite business development program on Radio Masterclass. Masterclass is powered by Joy Business and brought to us by Goyle. Goyle, they say good energy, Goyle, Yenara, Yedia. Masterclass is also powered by First Code Management Services, and they say industry, get it right. We're also privileged to have Lancaster University as one of our sponsors here on Masterclass, and they boast of being one of the only British university campuses in all of West Africa. We're excited to come your way again today with yet another exciting edition of Masterclass. My name, as always, is Yaw Barnafo, and I will be your host for today's conversation. And so in the last 3 weeks, if you've been listening to Masterclass, we started a certain conversation on cybersecurity, the business aspect of cybersecurity. And in the first conversation, we're joined by Nijan Mensah of Innovari. He shared some thoughts with us, and essentially he focused on the human being or the staff of every company or the employee being the first line of defense in the fight against cybersecurity. Last week, we were privileged to have the CEO of Innovari, CK Bruce, and CK also spent some time with us. He sort of focused on the management commitment, if you like, in fighting this again, because we're looking at you as a business person, we're looking at your institution, the business you've set up, and how cybersecurity affects you and affects your businesses, your bottom lines, your profits, your margins, how all of that works. And he dwelt a bit more on the commitment of management. We continue in that conversation again today. And again today, we're privileged to be joined in the studio by someone I'll be introducing very shortly. He's also very well versed in the field of information security. And I think that CK helped us distinguish between information security and information systems in last week's conversation. Today, we're going to be looking a bit more at recent threats or threats that exist in the area or in the arena of cyber security. And we're privileged to be joined by a gentleman who prefers to be known as an experienced leader in the field of information security. He's worked very hard to build people, brands, and process transformations in both Ghana and other countries, multinationals. He's worked with Millicom, with Vodafone, with Satanda, with KPMG, with Pricewater, and the list goes on and on. He's got over 23 years of experience under his belt. He's currently the chief, I'm trying to say this correctly, he's the chief enablement and information officer of APSA Ghana, and is in the person of Mr. Ebo Richardson. Ebo, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
I'll do the drum roll.
Thank you very much.
I'm excited. Yeah. I mean, we were having a conversation before we came on air, and this entire conversation of cybersecurity, cybercrime is endless. Earlier in the year, we had the privilege of having Kobe Spikey, who's also here at Multimedia, sort of introduce that conversation. But we can never seem to exhaust the conversation on cybersecurity. There are terms that come to my mind when I read about cybersecurity, and I was happy to find that in your notes, which you'll be sharing. I'm giving listeners a sneak preview. You talk about some of those things. CK tried to talk about some of them last week. You hear things like shoulder surfing. When Neil was talking about the staff being the first line, that thing which happens when you're probably in a public place and you hear someone talking on top of their voice, and the thing they're discussing is supposed to be confidential.
Yeah.
And so cybersecurity is not necessarily all system-based, but it's also human behavior and human attitude.
Absolutely.
Today, you're going to be telling us a bit more about some of the trends and some of the statistics and what exists within the industry and some of the ways in which we can be a bit more careful. I mean, I know one of the first reasons, I won't take the wind out of your sail, you'll talk about it shortly, but I suppose that's what's happening all over the world today, isn't it? Everything is going cyber. Everything is, and even more so spurred on by the onset of COVID. So now every single thing, somebody said to me once that he was at home trying to fix himself a meal, and then his gas stove wouldn't light. And by instinct, he went on his phone and typed, "gas repairers near me." And he got hits.
Yep.
So quickly he picks up the phone and says, "Listen, I have a problem with my gas stove." Hitherto, what will you do? You go to the nearest gas station or something like that and try and find the repairer. But that's what our lives have become.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the recent threats within the cybersecurity space.
Sure. Excellent. Wow, that's a rousing sort of introduction. Let me hope that I can maintain that.
No, you
that
will.
energy
You will.
level.
You will. Before you continue, though, just remind our listeners also that we're streaming live on Facebook, so you can join us. And Ibo was magnanimous enough to share some slides with us. So for those of us who like to make notes, please follow us on Facebook and follow his slides and make some notes.
Excellent.
Ibo,
Thank you.
talk to us.
So, Nana, it's a privilege to be on this esteemed platform. Thank you for the invitation. Let me also add that I think what you guys are doing here, Joy Business, this platform is a very noble one, trying to build capacity amongst our people in the country, and I think it's a good step in the right direction, particularly in these times. And I'd like to start by commending the producer and all of you for making this happen. It's a good thing.
Well, we're grateful. We are encouraged to do more.
Excellent.
We're encouraged.
Now, this cybersecurity, right? It's a whole sort of quagmire. It's this new threat on the landscape that we must all be mindful of. And like you said, I have a few slides that I hope our friends can follow to make the conversation a bit more easier to sort of contextualize. Trends, that's what the whole thing's about. So we've been speaking about cybersecurity for the last few weeks, as you said, and today we're looking at trends and where the trends are taking us. It would have been nice of me to come here today, Nana, and say, yeah, the trends are positive, everything's going in the right direction, we can all be happy, take off our hats and celebrate. Unfortunately, that is not the case. What we are seeing, by way of all the data points that are available, that are collected globally in this country as well as everywhere else in the world, by some measures, some metrics that we see, for instance, type, frequency of attacks, even sort of geographical location, things like that. By all of those, we are seeing the threat is expanding, if I can use that word. Okay? Expanding. It's becoming more. Now, it's not because we're not doing anything about it. It's because of the sheer volumes that we're seeing as a result of drivers, reasons, which I will espouse shortly. But let me give some quick sort of numbers just to contextualize. This is position this conversation, right? Globally, the daily cost, so when we take all the costs that have incurred as a result of cybersecurity or cyber attacks, globally, when we average them out, the daily cost to us, to organizations, individuals, everybody, all the stakeholders, is $16.4 billion. 16.4
Every day.
Every single day. If you amalgamate all the attacks and the costs that are incurred as a result, if you average them out, that is what we're seeing. $16.4 billion every day. That's a humongous amount of money. Yeah. Now, that shows you that if you are not playing the right game, you could be in trouble. Another one I have here is that there is an attack, a cybersecurity or a cyber attack somewhere in the world every 6 seconds.
Wow.
Every 6 seconds. So, I mean, it boggles the mind to think about all these activities. But when you are in the space and you see it, it's believable. Because with some of us in the space, in the industries, when we actually look at the record of attacks that we repel, it actually makes sense. These things are happening all the time. In Ghana, I think the figure is around 90 seconds or so, but globally it's every 6 seconds. In 2015, ransomware damage, ransomware has become quite prevalent these days, was calculated around $325 million globally. This year, by the end of the year, it is projected to be $20 billion in terms of the cost of just ransomware.
That's almost $1 million a day.
Exactly, and that's just one form of attack, of which there are many. Ghana here, the last official figures that we have around the cost of cyber attacks was around 105 million. This was 2018-2019 time, and we know that they've been increasing. So I'm sure once official figures are out, we will see that the number climb higher even still. So it is a pertinent topical issue that must be addressed, and I tend to use this expression that I say is now an existential concern. Now, typically when we use the word existential, we're talking about human beings and whether or not we're going to be here or not. But I'm using this term existential from a corporate perspective or from organizational perspective to say, if you make the wrong move, you are likely to find yourself not being there anymore, where cyber risks and cyber threats are concerned. So that's just to position this conversation. Now, why are we seeing this explosion, this exponential growth of these form of attacks?
I mean, when you talk about existential threat, it just sort of takes my mind back to something that Michael Mullen said. He's a U.S. Navy admiral, and he used the exact same words. And his point was, the single biggest existential threat out there is cyber. So I just wanted to tie it in with what you're saying.
Thank you.
I think it's so true.
I think it's incredible that somebody of an eminent person of his caliber,
so United States Navy admiral,
using the same sort of.
And you're 17th chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
Exactly, and this is a security person who has seen a lot of the dangers in the world. So that should position it. And I have a slide which sort of helps to position this whole scourge, if you like. Now there are four, in my view. There could be a myriad of reasons for. This explosion, this exponential growth. But there are four that stand out for me. And on my second slide, if our friends out there are following, you can see those four. The first is our greater dependence, our greater reliance on technology and digital platforms as a human race, right? If you look at what we're doing, you look at our behaviors, if you look at, the assets we now like to acquire, we have our smartphones, our tablets, our TVs, even in our cars, there are microchips that govern how, certain things happen within the car. Social media explosion. Right now, the youth are, TikTok is a craze out there, YouTube, people are even making money on the, as we were discussing earlier on. It's a never before seen sort of embracing of these platforms. It's almost like we're merging, the humanity is beginning to merge with these sort of systems. That reliance obviously positions us in a space where the threats that come with it are also pronounced. They're heavy, because if you have so much reliance on something, if that thing is not there, if it's troubled, if it has an issue, you have an issue. So that's the first reason. Now, I read somewhere, interestingly, that the current smartphones that we have, an iPhone, than the Apollo mission computers that sent man to the moon in the late 60s. 40,000 times, these machines. And here we are, we're using them for just WhatsApp and calls, right? But that's the power. That is the
completely
advancement.
underutilized.
Of course. But of course, you use it for what serves your purpose and your interest, right?
Wow.
But it just goes to show the journey we've taken over the years and how computers have become so dominant and so prevalent in our lives. The second reason I have here is about assets and value. What is happening is, as we become more digitally aligned, and we rely on these tools and these computers a lot more, we are starting to move the things that are valuable to us, the things that are assets that create value for us, from the real world into cyberspace. Right?
True.
That's what we're doing.
True.
I mean, look at mobile money, right? So, of course, you can still cash out, but you're putting value, money, into electronic form. And it still has value. You can still use it
Video
to do so
footage.
many things. Exactly. Everything.
Soft copies of documentation.
So think about it. If there is so much value, the reason why we have a lot of criminals in society at large is because there's value for them to take. They can break into your house and take your nice 85-inch TV. Now, if there's an equivalent value in cyberspace, now they need to go to cyberspace, because that's where the value is now, right? So as we shift more and more into this digital realm where we're moving, shifting value there, we're making that space also attractive for those criminals and unscrupulous people.
Indeed.
Who all want to, I always use this expression, I say they want to reap where they haven't sown. They want to take your, what you've worked hard for. They're coming there now. So that's the second reason. The third reason, by larger attack surface, is that we can hit you in so many more different places, right? And think about the Internet of Things. Right now, we're connecting everything you're connecting your TV, your fridge, your mobile devices are already connected. Now your car is also connected because they want to be able to track certain things and whether your engine is overheating. So everything is connected. And the more connected you are, the more points there is to attack you.
I'll tell you something interesting. And I shared this with CK last week.
Yeah.
About the car connection. I mean, suffice it to say, there's other connections where there's technology now which is being piloted. You walk into a shop and you touch nothing. You just look at the items or scan them and you go to your house and they get delivered.
That's right.
There's all sorts of things going on.
That's right.
But there's this video I saw, again on technology, connection of car to systems.
Yeah.
And it was one of those assistants.
Yep.
I don't want to mention the name. So the guy is driving and then he says, turn left at the next junction, turn right. And I don't know, I think he's having a bad day. So he says, oh, you're a computer, don't tell me what to do, I know where to go and all of that. And these things are built by humans to be interactive. So the computer then the computer says, do you realize that I'm connected to your braking system? Listen to this.
Oh my days.
If you keep talking to me like that, I'm going to drive you over a cliff and kill you. It may have been a satire, but I'm just saying the future of technology as I know it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is AI.
Of course, yeah.
And so we're connecting everything and we're creating dependencies, which is a question I'll ask you later.
Yeah.
Just wanted to drive home that point that you were making about connecting our lives to everything and then creating a wider surface for attack. We're literally living our lives online today, aren't we?
We are. And that creates opportunity. It creates, so for instance, you may have a small business, a small organization, and if you are very tech savvy, you may want to connect everything, your devices, everything, connected some other devices to it, which, because you think are personal, haven't necessarily been secured. You may then, that's where you may expose yourself. That may be the vulnerability that will be exploited in order to bring you down. So we're creating such a large attack surface. We're creating so many opportunities where we can be hit by virtue of the fact that, we're connecting, we're interacting, we're creating all these opportunities. So that is the third reason for this explosion. And then the final reason, which is more of a sort of a geopolitical, socioeconomic sort of reason or drive, and that is global dynamics. Whatever is happening in the world, whether it's countries disagreeing, having fights, whatever, whether it's poverty creating certain difficulties, whether it's family breakdowns creating challenges for people, it's creating all of these things together are creating a world where other people feel either sufficient interest or sufficient reason to go bad, as in to start doing some of the wrong things. And interestingly enough, when people decide to do these things, people decide to go into organized crime or are forced into it, or people decide to do terrorism or whatever, they have at their disposal the same sort of technologies, the same capabilities that the rest of us might be using to run our businesses or, develop new solutions or develop a cure for cancer. Those same technologies, those same tools, perhaps even more, are available to these individuals. So if you take these four reasons, number one, we have a greater dependency or reliance on technology and digital systems. Number two, we have created a larger attack surface by having this, huge, so many things happening. Number three, we are moving a lot more value into cyberspace, from the real world. And number four, global dynamics are creating people who feel justified to do some of the bad things that we're talking about here. If you bring those four together, that is why you're seeing this exponential growth. And I showed in my first slide, this curve which shows the rate at which just malware is increasing, and it's scary over the years. It's shooting straight up into the air because there is interest, there is agenda, there is all these things that are happening, and there's opportunity, and these things are coming together. So those are the reasons. My third slide is an interesting one because it's one that I sourced from the World Economic Forum. And it just helps us to position the scourge we call cybersecurity. It positions it within the broader context of what other, global threats or global level of risks that are out there. If you look at it, it's quite interesting. Nana, you will see that, you have all these sort of things, debt crisis, which may be related to the kind of things that we saw in 2007, 2008 with the global financial systems crash. You have the pandemic, which we're now seeing, which they're calling here as infectious diseases. So you have all these huge things, some of which are existential threats to humanity, because you're looking at even climate change and things like that. And within the same quadrant that you have climate change and environmental disasters and debt crisis and even pandemics, within that same quadrant is where you have cybersecurity. This is coming from, not from me, this is coming from the World Economic Forum, right? And that should help us to position, the magnitude of this phenomenon that we're speaking about here. Yeah.
I mean, if you're listening to us and you're following the slides on Facebook, it'll be good to take a look at it. Now, I'm not looking at it directly on my tablet here, and I see what you're talking about. It's smack in the same quadrant where you have things like environmental damage, biodiversity loss.
Exactly.
Where you have social cohesion, erosion, you have extreme weather, because these things are happening all over the world.
Exactly.
So essentially, life and living it. While things are getting better, it's getting worse in some places, and in the midst of all of that, and us moving the value, like you said, into the cyberspace, there is also the concern of cybersecurity.
Exactly. So I mean, we say these things and we want to try and paint a real picture of what the landscape looks like. It may scare a little bit because once you start talking about things that are existential, there's a certain element of fear that may come with that. But all of that is the bad news, right? The good news is that we can do something about them. The fact that they are threats,
I like that.
The fact that they are serious things that we need to pick up our heads and do something about does not necessarily mean that we should throw up our hands in the air and say, hey, we're doomed and
good night, it's curtains.
Exactly. That's not it. I think yes, whilst there are some unscrupulous characters who want to do some of these things in the world, there are also the cowboys, the good guys who want to prevent some
the
of
white
these
hat hackers and ethical hackers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And protect us, and so there's a lot of answers or solutions or remedies that can be deployed, and I'll speak about some of those in a minute. But the next slide that I have here really tries to just provide a bit of an idea of what some of the current major threats are. Okay, so I just list them, and I include a graphic in here which sort of gives us an idea of what these things are. But the first one that I have on my list is malware. And malware is a short form for malicious software. And basically, there are people out there who write code, computer programs that are designed to either steal some information, cause some damage, destroy your system, for all sorts of reasons. And the motivation for people doing these wrong things can be many. Some are terrorists, some just want to steal their, thieves essentially. Some is industrial espionage. So there are all kinds of reasons or motivations why people do some of the things that they do. But ultimately, they create code that can cause you damage, and that's malware. And we're seeing a high prevalence rate of malware today, and we expect that to continue for the foreseeable future, because it is one of the surest ways to be able to access certain things or siphon certain things or close down or cause damage to certain things. So that we expect to see for a while. So that's malware. The second one is information leakage or data loss. Now this has increased in its prevalence over the last I would say 15 to 18 months. And can you guess why? Our good old friend pandemic, COVID. So with the advent of working from home, where people can sort of be stationed or remotely be stationed in a number of areas and work, it's exposing certain connectivities which can then be more susceptible to information leakage and sort of people siphoning your critical company or secrets or whatever. So that has become one of the key threats that we're seeing on the landscape, and various professionals are trying to combat them. Then the next one I have is phishing and social engineering. Now phishing is one that is very common also, and phishing is essentially luring unsuspecting people into following something or clicking a link that will either download a payload, some sort of software that will do something in the background, or take them to a place where sensitive information can be gleaned from them.
I'm actually very interested in this part of your presentation.
Yeah.
And there are a few more terminologies I'd just like you to touch on for me.
Sure.
But I want our listeners to be a part of this. So
Sure.
I want us to get interactive, and then they can just sort of phone in and ask the questions while we continue with our presentation.
Sure.
Before we do that, though, I just want to sort of acknowledge our sponsors for the show today. Goyle is one of our sponsors. Goyle, they say good energy. Goyle, First Code Management are also one of our sponsors. They say industry gets it right. And then Lancaster University are also one of our sponsors. We'll take a quick message from our sponsors. When we come back, we get interactive.
Your favorite on-air business development program, Joy Business Masterclass, is in session, and you can interact with us on Facebook via the Joy 99.7 FM or Joy Business pages. If you tweet, the handle is at Joy 997 FM or at Joy Business GH. Don't forget to hashtag JB Masterclass. You can also call us on 0302 216541 or send your questions and contributions through to the WhatsApp number 0551 111997, and our facilitators will address your concerns. Attention everyone, class is in progress.
Welcome back. If you just tuned in, this is Masterclass and we're interactive right now. We're still discussing cybersecurity here in the studio, and we're privileged to be joined by Mr. Ebo Richardson. He's the Chief Enablement and Information Security Officer of APSA Ghana. Numbers to call 0302-216-541. That's 0302-216-541. Or you can also send us your comment on Facebook or on WhatsApp on 055-1111-997. Send us a comment on 055-1111-997, or pick up that phone, give us a call, 0302-216-541. What is your situation at work? What kind of cyber security issues have you encountered? What new learning points have you picked up from this conversation? We're doing this so that we don't all have to reinvent the wheel ourselves. Like we always say, we learn from other people's mistakes. Everything today is online. What is your specific situation? What is your experience? Pick up that phone. Let's have a conversation. Ask your questions. Ibu here will be more than happy to answer them. 0302-216-541. Ibu, while we wait for the phone lines to ring, perhaps we can continue with that conversation.
Sure.
Yes.
So as I was saying, we have phishing, which is used a lot, and one of the ways that these criminal elements try to get in is what we call social engineering. And it's just a form of manipulation, right? They find means and ways. Sometimes they use information they already gleaned about you from social media, from other places, to sort of compel you, to make you feel that there's a legitimacy, and in so doing, manipulate you to divulge in more things than you should. And that's happening quite a lot. And phishing is a sort of the electronic version of that, if you like, the email where there's a click here and solve this problem, or click here and win this thing. And all they're doing is actually siphoning information from you, which they can then use to
how do you know when to click and when not to click, for example?
So there's a lot of education that has to happen to sort of give the cues, and there are cues. There are things that you can look at. Some of them are quite technical. For instance, you should be able to check the email address to make sure, because some email addresses are fabricated. They're not the real ones. They'll use some.
It's like kofi.kumi@ghana.com.
Yes.
And then it's kofi.kumi with a double M.
Exactly.
Or kofi.kumi with an N.
Exactly.
It's little things
like that, so those things are happening all the time. But generally, the principle is, if it seems too good to be true, if you're not expecting anything. So for instance, somebody sends you an email that you won a raffle, but you haven't entered any raffle. Why are you going to go and click on the thing to go and win an award? So you have to be, careful. And if you're unsure about,
don't try to reap where you haven't sown.
Oh well, that's for that. Where you're unsure, usually if you're in an organizational setting, there are people who it's their job to deal with these things, and you can refer it to them just to be sure before you go on, with whatever you wanted to do. So those are the kind of things. So,
so other than phishing, what are some of the other?
There's a technical term we call distributed denial of service, right? It's very technical, but let me explain what it is. It's just basically a way of shutting down services by sending it more requests than it can handle. So let's say I can take Joy Business website, right? And let's say there's something big happening that Joy Business has put on their website or is streaming live or something like that. And there are people on the other side who don't want that thing to go out. What they can do, and they can just set up a computer system which sends requests. So it's like it's trying to access that site, but they're sending so many requests that the Joy Business server cannot handle it. It's like, I don't know what to do, and it hangs for a long time, basically disabling the service by doing that. That's what we call denial of service, and people do that quite a bit. So if, for instance, people wanted to attack some bank from being able to give services, they can do that. They can set up a system that just says, okay, go to this place, www.bank.com, and just attack it. Put so many things in there that the server just gets confused and gives up. And that is what we call denial of service, or distributed denial of service. And that is also quite prevalent. We have identity theft. Now, it's not that big in this part of the world yet, but it is quite big elsewhere, which is basically people pretending to be you. They get information that is, personal information about you, your person, and they're able to use that to open bank account, get loans in your name, and you're the, left to, pick up.
I've had cases where people's emails have been hacked. People's accounts.
Of course. And send
phones.
instructions to your banker to say, can you transfer this amount of money from here to here? It's happening. It's huge. So it's also something that people need to be aware of. AI and botnets, artificial intelligence. Now, rather than using artificial intelligence and botnets to solve real problems so that people can benefit, what are we doing? Some people are using it to attack and to reap where they haven't sown, to even cause damage, to certain systems and solutions and services. We're seeing that. So there's there's probably, if I just sort of do an estimate, there's probably maybe 30 to 40 different categories of attacks that there are. And they're growing by the day, because people are coming up as we invent new things and new platforms and new solutions. People are coming up with new ways of attacking them.
So I remember CK said last week that one of the first things is to be aware and to have information, because information is power. So business owners were saying that have education, get education regarding some of the trends that exist within cybersecurity. We've shared a few of them here today. We can't share all of them. But once you're aware and you're educated, what else can a business owner do? What are some of the recommendations you have?
Okay, excellent. So that takes me to my final slide, which, again, I hope our friends are following. And the final slide is one where I say, okay, remember I said earlier on, the bad news is the fact that these things are out there and there's lots of them. The good news is the fact that we can do some things about them. We can take some steps and some measures to try and at least mitigate their impact and have ways of dealing with them. Now, I created my own sort of framework, or three-step process, if you like, for tackling these things. The first I call protect, okay? And within protect, there are two elements that drive that. The second I call assure. And then again, there are two elements in there. And then the third I call orient. And I'll tell you why I use the word orient in a minute.
Okay.
So
please hold that thought for me 1 second. I've got Igor on Facebook. Igor says, while upgrading every aspect of our lives, we must keep an eye on techno-chauvinism. Not everything is solved by computerizing. We need to create the right balance with humanism. And this is Igor on Facebook. Quick comments?
Well, I think it's an interesting point. It's one that personally I would agree with, and it would seem counterintuitive for me to agree with it, given that I'm a technology person.
Exactly.
But I've always held the position that everything that we do, at least the intent behind it, is to improve humanity, is to improve human lives and make us better. So if we're also doing things that are not necessarily enduring to that outcome, then maybe we need to take a rain check on certain things. Look at the time that COVID struck and the time that we were all supposed to, socially distant and keep away and work from home, lockdown. That was the point at which you started to appreciate how important to be able to commune with your brother or your friend or whatever. So there is a human need
to breathe without a mask.
Exactly.
Oh God.
there is a human need, social beings that we are, that we need to look at beyond just, the digitalization of everything or the technologies that we use. They're there as enablers to make life easier and better for us. But I think we may run a risk of going too far the other side if we continue at current trends. So I think it's one topic that probably should be explored on its own. Are we going to become cyborgs in future?
Do you think our humanity, just a few seconds, do you think our humanity will at some point be diminished? I don't want to use the word lost. And a very good afternoon to my friend, Mr. Kofi Dati. I had this conversation with you about 3 years ago, and I said, people sit in the bus stop, and then instead of talking to the 5 people who are there at a party and 10 people at their table, they are on their phones. And he says, but on their phones, they're talking to 50 people.
Yeah.
But do you think our humanity will be lost at some point or diminished with all of this technology thing? Just 10 seconds. I think we can't exhaust it. But
I don't think so. My personal opinion is I think we'll get to a point where we realize or recognize the value of some of the things that we're taking for granted now. I do feel that we will be some way along the path before we have that realization. I do. I see some mergence, some sort of blurring of the boundary between humans and machines. I see that. But that's some 30, 40 years in the future, I think.
Okay. We're interactive right now. This is Masterclass.
So
once again, numbers to call 0302216541. I have just enough time to take just one or two calls.
Okay.
Numbers to call 0302216541. Otherwise, send us your comments on 05511119997. Able to take us home.
Sure. So protect. There are 2 things I am advising our friends to do where protect is concerned. The first is identify and safeguard key assets. So your key assets are those important structures, systems, computerized systems, those things, channels that create data, that create value for you. They're the things that really drive the value creation machinery in your organization. Protect them. Make sure that you identify all of them, the potential damage that will be done to them if they're not there or if they're compromised, and the potential threats that are coming from outside to exploit any vulnerabilities. Once you can do that, you can start to ensure that you have the right sort of access controls in place, you limit privileges, you're looking at various flows, you're having firewalls. All these technical things that we do is just to make sure that we're protecting those assets. And it's important that we protect them continually. The number 2 is to develop resilience and continuity mechanisms. What that means is that security is good, and we try to be as secure as possible. But every security expert worth his salt will tell you that there's nothing like 100% security, which means at some point something could give. How ready are you for when something gives? Are you able to pick up, clean up, and continue? Do you have the right backups in place? Do you have the right resilience structures? Can your business continue? That needs to be taken a look at. So that's protect.
Business continuity
And resilience. Resilience is the strength to endure, but also the ability to recover quickly. Okay. Then when we go to assure, what I'm saying in the assure part of the framework is 2 things. First of all, you need to monitor performance. You need to have a continual eye over what is happening. As I said to you earlier on, that those of us in the domain, we see a lot of attacks happening every day, but they're unsuccessful attacks. And that means that things are happening all the time. So you need to keep an eye on it. You cannot rest on your laurels. You cannot lose sight of the fact that, there are things going on. So monitoring your asset, your system, monitoring your boundaries, all of that is important. You need to have a dashboard that tells you what is going on a daily basis. Then you need to continually scour the landscape. You need to know about the threats because they're increasing every day. So if you sit on your laurels thinking, okay, I know about ransomware and I know about viruses and I'm okay, because I've dealt with that. Tomorrow there will be something else that you weren't okay with. And those expose us to potential what we call zero-day attacks, which is things that we didn't know about. The developers didn't know about.
Zero-day attacks.
Zero-day attacks. The organizations didn't know about, but somebody somewhere found a vulnerability and exploited it. And it can be very damaging because you have not deployed any remedies, any sort of prophylactics in your organization because you didn't know about it. Those are what we call zero-day, and they can happen. So it's important that we keep our eye out. And then the final one, orient, is about culture. You see, 2 things. We need to build a security culture in our organizations that people understand. Yes, the consciousness, that's the word. That people understand that these things are out there, they're threats, and that the consequences of falling foul to some of these things could be really damaging, so that they behave the right way. You know, the right incentives, the right consequences must also be in place. But beyond that, to build what I'm calling an ownership culture, where people feel that humanity, that human element that you were talking about, alluding to before, comes into being. People feel connected. They feel that they are stakeholders of the organization. They might not have shares in it, but that they want it to do well because it's doing well and yours to their personal benefits. They get what we call whiffing, what's in it for me, also satisfied. If you can create that ownership culture, then people wouldn't necessarily want to sort of just be negligent and fall foul and damage the organization, because they know that if they do, it comes back to them. So that is what I'm calling orient. So if you can, protect, do all the right things, the technical things, to make sure that your asset space is secure, is properly safeguarded, then you are sure to make sure that you continually monitor, you keep things safe. If there are new threats, you develop, remedies against those as well. And then finally, get the right culture, orient your people in the right way. I believe that if you use these three blocks, these three pillars, then you'll be onto a winner. But you have to continually do that. I think the operative word that I would like to end with is that it has to be a continual vigilance. You cannot take your eye off this ball, because it's an evolving space. New threats are emerging, almost on a daily basis. So you also have to keep up.
As you talk about orient, there's something that sort of resonates very strongly with me, that until we get to that point where everything is completely done by machines, and even then, systems are improving, and so systems are becoming obsolete real quicker than they used to be. But today we have a sort of connect between systems and humanity, and therefore, so long as we have 2 points, there are increased, and I think the terminology that you used there, there are increased points of failure, I call them, but the terminology used was a wider surface of attack.
That's right.
I like that you're driving home the point that our activity, our attitudes, our orientation as a people will be the first line of defense in dealing with this issue of cybersecurity, because we cannot emphasize that enough.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So for the business owner who's listening, who may not be savvy to all of these things you're talking about, maybe they're an accountant, maybe they're a chartered accountant, maybe they're an auditor, maybe they went to do school, they did MBA. How and where do they get help? I know CK talked about in a very last week, but I've always said here on the show that you cannot know everything.
Sure.
So when you need help in an area where you're not the subject the experts in that field, shout.
Sure.
I had a boss who would say, "Yaw, when you can't do it, shout." I said, "What does it mean?" He says, "Raise your hand and say, I need help." So for all the business owners who are listening, who are saying, "Ebo, I hear you, but I need help."
Sure.
The last time I heard firewall, it was in a class I didn't understand. The last time I heard Trojan horse, it was in a movie I watched called Helen of Troy. Where do I go to for help?
Okay.
And how do I get help?
Okay. I think, in order to answer that question.
And while you're answering that, sort of give us a takeout for today, and then we sort of end on that.
Okay, sure. I think in order to answer that question, we need to look at, different organizations and different size of organizations, because larger organizations can afford to hire the expertise, and the expertise is out there. Of course, now it's a bit of a premium because this thing is becoming quite serious. But the expertise is out there, so you can hire the expertise. For instance, the Bank of Ghana required all banks to have CISOs, who are Chief Information Security Officers, and they have them now. And these are the experts. They're the ones that will drive the whole program of securing the organization. So for those larger organizations out there who can afford to insource that expertise, or even outsource it to other organizations, I would recommend that. That is the best case scenario. And it's no surprise that CK mentioned Innovari, because he's doing it for a number of companies out there, for which he's getting a lot of plaudits also. So I think they're doing a great job there. And there are others who are also in the marketplace, looking to help organizations secure their environments and their businesses as a whole. For the smaller SME, also there are some players who are for the tier 2, who will come and help you at a more affordable price point. So they exist as well. But for the sort of one-man band who may not be able to afford expertise, I think there are internet-based resources that they can also use to good effect. Do a bit of research. For all you need to understand is probably what you're trying to protect and what the risks to your particular asset might be. What I did at the end of my slide as an appendix was to give some best practice guidelines to individuals. So for those people who are sort of doing their own thing, maybe how they can go about protecting themselves. And if anybody is interested, they can ask for those slides and sort of
and it will be helpful.
Yes, and it will be helpful to them. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ibo. This has been a very exciting and enriching conversation. I never have enough when I have this conversation on cybersecurity. I hope that we have the opportunity to do this again. But thank you also to you out there who was listening to us and following us. This has been Masterclass. We've been spending time with Ibo Richardson here talking about cybersecurity. We're back on your radio same time next week with a further conversation. Thank you for listening. Up next, we continue with The Ignition with Sami Forsen. See you next week.